twice taken the ferry that like passes through the Lake Michigan Triangle, and I have yet to mysteriously disappear. So, so disappointing.
Well, now I'm going to take it and I'm going to disappear.
Yeah, if I'm going to disappear, it better be mysterious.
I'm Paige.
And I'm Megan.
And this is Spooky Science Sisters.
Hello, you're listening to Spooky Science Sisters, a podcast where we present to you a science-based and probably very giggly discussion on all things strange and unusual.
In this episode, we are going to talk about what is going on with some spooky triangles. Yes, you heard me correctly. Triangles.
It's the triangle episode. Before something spooky, we should take a second to thank our Patreons, of which there are 10 now, which is crazy. But they include Holly Kane, Casey Ma, Mark Stanbrook, Chris Wolf, Cassandra, Chuck Grantham, I Like Rocks Like a Lot, Tibby, Tanner Johnson, and Alex Christensen. We appreciate you guys so much. We have goodies coming your way very, very shortly. And if you are out there and you also want some spooky goodies, you should become a Patreon.
Megan, catch me up on some of the spooky happenings in your life.
There's not a lot. And honestly, I wrote this one down a long time ago because we've been putting off this recording a little bit. It was like life craziness on your end, I think. And then I was like sick as a dog. So we're a week behind because of that. And yeah, now here we are like the night before both of us are supposed to travel. So it's like, why? This is insane. So I realized a couple weeks ago, Steve, my husband, you know who that is, so whatever, was traveling for work, and my daughter was staying with her grandparents, my parents, and I am such a fucking baby now, staying by myself. It was like one of my first times, if not my first time, having to stay alone in this house. It's like a bigger house than our old one. And yeah, I don't know. I was just like doing a really good job of freaking myself out. Like, I think at one point I thought that, like, I swear that I heard like a giggle from somewhere in the house. And I'm pretty sure that it was just Georgie making a really weird noise because he was like freaking out because I gave him a special chewy treat or whatever. But I was totally wigging myself out. So yeah. So I'm no better than everyone who's like, there's a ghost in my house, because it took like one night for me to be like, I'm afraid. Paige, come stay with me.
I'm sorry, but to add to this story that you're telling, you know how when we recorded our very first like 2 or 3 episodes, for some reason you kept getting that like demon voice whenever.
Oh yeah.
For some reason, like that same thing just happened.
Oh no, don't tell me that.
So hopefully, like, and only for like a second, but it was like you were talking and under your voice was like a roar.
No. I hate that. I hate that a lot.
I also hate it.
Great.
But it happened.
But it happened. Okay. What has happened spooky with you?
So it had been pretty quiet up until, I think it was just this last weekend. Elliot and I were sitting in the basement with our dog, and I don't even remember what we were doing, watching a show probably, or playing games or something. It doesn't matter. But we're sitting there, and it was like, I don't know. Do you remember, like 8 or 9 o'clock at night?
And yeah, I don't know.
Something like that. And all of a sudden we heard what sounded like somebody knocking on our basement window. And like we both heard it, and our dog, like, she jumped up and started barking, and she heard it. And he went upstairs and I heard him like checking, around the windows. And then I like thought I heard him like tiptoe to the bedroom and then like tiptoe around. And I was like, what is going on up there? And he like totally freaked me out. But we think it was just like fireworks or something in the neighborhood because apparently some of our neighbors had like heard something similar that night. But we definitely thought somebody was just like standing there knocking on our basement window. So that totally freaked us out.
Yeah. You texted me about it, and then you were like, never mind. I think it's just something going on in the neighborhood. And I was like, how does that sound like something on your windows?
We both definitely thought it just sounded like somebody knocking on our window. So maybe we don't know what happened. I hate it though. So that's my something spooky. And then I had some things that were not so spooky, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And the first is that it's been really weird knowing that Megan's recording episodes and that I am not also recording episodes. Like I know she's on and I'm not on with her. So that's been weird. But, and then this is good news. I don't think we've talked about it yet. So I feel like we need to share it, that after almost like 3 years of talking about it, but probably more like 2.5 years of planning it, we finally have everything booked to go to Salem like this summer.
Yes.
Which is very exciting for us, but is also exciting for you because we plan to do a Salem special episode when we get back.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's shocking that we haven't covered Salem witch trials up to this point. And I feel like there's probably people like, why would you not cover this? Because there are like definite, spooky science aspects or things that have been suggested related to everything that went down in 16, whatever the year was. But yeah, we haven't because this trip kept getting canceled. And now it's finally going to happen. So it's going to happen for you guys as well.
Yay.
Yay.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. Some fucked up shit's going to happen before then for sure.
Shut up, Megan.
We shouldn't even talk about it out loud.
Shut up.
Shut up. It's happening. Okay. Well, in case you were wondering what spooky triangles means, I feel like probably everyone figured it out. I feel like we think we're being cryptic, but really, like, what else would there be? We are going to talk about some
spooky triangles,
some triangularly shaped areas in this world that people have declared are spooky. Which, saying it out loud, like, does just make it feel totally arbitrary. I have a thing about the triangle thing, so we'll touch on that later on, I think. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Bermuda Triangle. We're going to talk about a couple other spooky triangle areas. And yeah, we'll see where we end up.
Perfect. Well, when I first told Elliot that we were doing the Bermuda Triangle episode, he informed me that he is the reason for all of the things that have happened there. So, like, basically, I already debunked it. We don't need to talk about it.
Great. So this episode is over, and I can go play video games now.
See ya.
Bye.
Okay, but seriously, or, maybe not so seriously. The Bermuda Triangle is an area of the North Atlantic between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, described by the Encyclopedia Britannica as vaguely triangular.
I don't understand that. It is triangular.
Like, right. It's either a triangle or it's not a triangle.
It's the space between 3 points. That is a triangle.
I think the point that they are trying to make is that, like, depending on what source you read or what stories you read, those are different points. So, like,
yes, yeah, okay,
yeah. I think that's like the point they're trying to make, but it's like it's either a triangle or it's not a fucking triangle.
Right. Which is sort of a whole thing with this entire phenomenon is like no matter which triangle you talk about, there seem to be like slightly different corners to them, or there can be different variations. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, which is it? Because like really this just sounds like a load of bullshit if you're just changing the edges of it to like fit the stories that you want to fit into it. So
Exactly.
anyway, debunked it. Moving on. Just kidding.
Yeah, so it's also known as the Devil's Triangle, where more than 50 boats and 20 airplanes have either crashed or disappeared.
But I'm gonna be honest, that amount of boats and airplanes like doesn't sound that many.
No, it
sound like
isn't that many.
many.
It's really, really not. I mean,
Like-
here's the thing. In the last week, there have been 3 train derailments. So, like,
yeah. Right. Think about like the history of seafaring as
right.
well as like the history of like even aviation is like 100 years old, and like how many planes and boats travel through that part of the world every single day. Like that doesn't sound like that many. All right, go ahead.
I agree. So, once again, we already talked about this, but depending on what source you're reading from, it covers at least 500,000 square miles, though I've seen a couple references saying that it's up to 1.5 million square miles.
Yes. And some people to that point stretch it all the way like to the Irish coast, which is basically the entire goddamn Atlantic Ocean. Like at that point, just be like, the entire ocean is spooky.
We've already done an episode on.
Yeah, just go listen to that. It just seems so arbitrary. Like not only the points that they define as the edges of the points of the triangles, but also just like the triangle shape in general.
Mhm.
But I don't know, maybe I know I'm overthinking it, so whatever. The first official reference to the Bermuda Triangle, though, doesn't appear until 1964 in a pulp magazine article called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle by Vincent Gaddis. And if you are like me, I've heard the phrase pulp magazine before, but never really thought I should look up what that is. So if you also don't know what it is, apparently, it is an inexpensive magazine of fictional stories. And these were popular between the 1890s and 1950s, and they're called pulp magazines because they used cheap wood pulp paper to print them on. So I think it's like those really like sort of thin, flimsy, like really cheap paper that it's printed on. Yeah. So you heard the word fictional stories. So like long story short, I think Vincent Gaddis maybe either took some real stories of shipwrecks and plane crashes and, constructed this whole idea of a mysterious Bermuda Triangle, or people read this and ran with it. And like any shipwreck or plane crash that has happened in that area has been attributed to his like deadly Bermuda Triangle. So who knows, chicken or egg, I guess. But there were also some references to strange disappearances in that area, which occur as early as 1950, meaning like the references occur as early as 1950. The stories stretch back to, I think, the 1800s, if not earlier. The triangle shape, as well as there being some sort of like paranormal aspect to this, was first laid out by Alan W. Eckert with respect to the disappearance of Flight 19, which we will talk about in a few minutes. Many writers have elaborated on Gaddis's stories. One book that stuck out to me in particular, because it seems to have been particularly popular, was a book called The Bermuda Triangle, which was written by Charles Berlitz in 1974. And Charles Berlitz was a linguist and author who was interested in the paranormal, but like has no real credentials that I would think like would qualify him to write something about like some mysterious geospatial space on Earth's surface. So I was a little bit like, okay, buddy, like it's not even a historian or anything. And of course, he's also written books about Atlantis, the Philadelphia experiment, Roswell, And, so I think he's just sort of, he's sort of a nut. I'm not surprised, but his book was very popular. I think I read it had sold like 20 million copies or something like that. So it was a bestseller. Okay, so I think our plan here is, because we joke that 50 shipwrecks and 20 plane crashes doesn't sound like that much, but we're just going to pick a couple of sort of the most famous or most popular disappearances and wrecks to talk about before we jump into debunking. So I want to start with a shipwreck, and I will start with the USS Cyclops, which is a pretty awesome name for a Navy ship.
It is.
I would like to be on the USS
Cyclops.
Okay, so this was a U.S. Navy ship that was carrying manganese ore, a big heavy load of manganese ore that sank on March 4th, 1918 in the area that is generally considered the Bermuda Triangle. And it went missing without a trace. It was a big ship, a big Navy vessel, and is the largest loss of life in U.S. Navy history that was not combat related. There were 309 crew, and it mentioned passengers in one article, so I'm not sure if like the 309 number is crew and passengers, or if that was just the passengers or just the crew and there were additional passengers. But either way, a bunch of people. And there's a logical explanation for this. Likely it was a storm. Potentially there was some influence of the heavy load of manganese ore that the ship was carrying. It was designed to carry coal, and coal is like much less dense and much less heavy than manganese ore. So, that might have affected and making it a little bit easier to sink. One thing that is a little bit weird about the fact that this sank and that it sank in the Bermuda Triangle is that the Cyclops and all three of its sister ships, the Jupiter, the Nereus, and the Proteus, all sank like within a 20 to 30 year period. That said, it might not be that weird because the Jupiter, the Nereus, and the Proteus were all active during World War II, and probably that's what happened to them. Like a U-boat got them, or some other. I think the Jupiter was for sure bombed. The Nereus and the Proteus, they're not sure if they got torpedoed or not, but either way, something happened to them during wartime. So it's probably not that mysterious.
Where did they sink?
Yes. So I don't really know. Yeah, so that's where this story gets like a little bit odd too, because most sources focus on just the Nereus and the Proteus and don't even mention the Jupiter. So I'm like a little fuzzy on whether the Jupiter is an official sister ship or not. The Nereus and the Proteus, though, some sources say the Atlantic, some say specifically the North Atlantic, but then others say that they also sank in the Bermuda Triangle. So, I don't know. There's, definitely some funny history warping happening here, depending on, where you read and who you ask. And even, on Wikipedia, if you looked at the Bermuda Triangle page, or if you looked at the page for, the individual ships, it gave you different information. So, it got a little bit fuzzy, as these things often do. So I'm not sure. So it's a little bit mysterious, but this is one of the most famous ones that people like to drag out because it disappeared without a trace. They've never found it. And, all the crew and passengers went down. Obviously, they were never found as well. So it is very tragic. And there's a couple weird details, but overall, I would say, my weird shit-o-meter is pretty low on this one.
Yeah. There is weirder shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I think that you could easily find an explanation for what happened there.
Yeah. I think it was probably just a storm. So
yeah.
It is what it is.
Surprise. It's all storms.
Oops, all storms.
Oops, all storms.
So, Paige, you were going to tell us about one of the popular plane wrecks that people like to talk about. Plane wrecks? Plane crashes.
Plane wrecks sort of works. So, are you familiar with the Flight 19 story?
No,
Okay.
All I knew is that there were famous plane crash stories from the Bermuda Triangle. I had never heard of Flight 19 specifically. Okay. So this is like one of those ones where I guess I just don't find it that spooky because I think like there are plenty, which we'll talk about. I think there are plenty of logical explanations. So I just like have never gone out of my way to like look at a bunch of stuff about it.
Yeah. Like I've always known it was like a thing, but that's about it. So I'm with you. But with Flight 19, the reason I asked is because it technically isn't really considered a crash.
Oh.
It's, I think, considered a disappearance.
Okay.
Though, like, prob's a crash that we just never found. So Flight 19 was the name that was given to the flight leader in charge of a unit of 5 bombers in the Navy who were leaving in December of 1945 for a training flight. And they were leaving out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it was supposed to be 3 legs of this training flight. The first leg of the flight went really well. When they looked ahead, there wasn't really any concern of weather. There may be or like any big weather storms or anything, maybe a few like scattered thunderstorms and things, but nothing that they were super worried about. During the second leg of the training flight, the pilots were heard coming over comms saying that they didn't think they were going the right way. There were some communications about thinking they had gotten lost. One was from the lead of that crew saying, "I don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost after that last turn." And at one point said, both my compasses are out and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale. So there's like definitely communication about them getting lost and not being able to figure out where they were supposed to go. And then at some point, it sounds like it was about 2 hours after those communications started, they lost total communication. Like they just didn't hear from them again.
Mm-hmm. And this is like all 5 planes?
All 5 planes went missing. It was a total of 13 people. Well, let me back up. I'm not clear that it was a total of 13 people.
Okay.
There are, by the end of the story, it sounds like 13 people have gone missing. But there was apparently at some point a seaplane that gets sent out to try to rescue them, to go find them. And that seaplane also goes missing.
Okay.
So
there's at least 5 people, right?
Yeah, there's a total of
1 person per plane.
There's either 13 people by the end or there's 13 people before the rescue plane. But I can't seem to figure out exactly how many. So the seaplane goes out, like I said, and tries to find them. And once again, there's no communication back from them. I have read at some sources that like they had thought they had seen the plane and that they were going to follow its track and then they never heard from again.
Yeah.
Though some sources I've read have also suggested that people believe that the seaplane sort of like caught fire and exploded after takeoff, that apparently at that point, those particular planes like weren't that reliable and were prone to accidents. So that could have happened.
Right. Well, and here's the thing that I was remembering as you were talking and doing some quick Googling, but I remember from the Amelia Earhart episode that sort of like the modern way that planes navigate with radar and all the instrumentation that they have now, like wasn't a thing. Like it was starting to become a thing at this point. It had been invented, but it doesn't become common or widely used until like the 1950s, or like maybe it doesn't even really get implemented until the 1950s. So it sounds very spooky and mysterious for all of them to go missing. You know, same story with Amelia Earhart, but navigation was like a lot more sketch than it was now, especially if you got caught in like bad weather or poor visibility or whatever. So,
Right. And I was going to say, I had read that, and once again, like it depends which source you're reading from, but that there had been some storms they had hit. And if that's the case and they didn't know where they were, like, heck, I mean, they could have crashed into each other. Like, you don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like if you look at that part of the world, I mean, if you take like if you had like I don't know had to navigate around a storm or something and you get turned around, like it's pretty easy to just start like heading out into sort of like open ocean for thousands of
Oh,
miles.
yeah.
And then like, you run out of fuel or whatever happens before you can get yourself turned around. So, yeah. So, again, maybe not that spooky.
Very sad, but maybe
Very
not that
sad.
spooky.
Maybe not that spooky. Okay. Well, so that's some notable things that have happened. And again, a lot of the stories, I'm sure Paige will attest to this as well, like sort of follow the same script or have very similar things that have happened with their disappearances. And it's like, yeah, ultimately there are plenty of ways that you can explain it. So we can move on to talking about some debunking or I guess reasons other than totally mundane weather events and getting lost that might explain what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle. And this is sort of like assuming that there is maybe something a little weird happening there, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So actually, the first thing I'm going to talk about is a theory that seemed like it was maybe gaining some momentum for a little bit of time, like in the early 2000s, but maybe isn't actually a thing.
Gotcha.
So basically, this theory was that it's the methane bubble theory, which I think a lot of people are familiar-ish with, or have at least heard of it.
This is probably this is like the most out there one of like the sciencey explanations.
Yeah, but it was like definitely tossed around as a possible explanation for a little bit.
Totally.
And so the idea is that there have been disturbances like on or within the seafloor that cause methane bubbles to rise to the surface of the water. And the thought was that they were large enough bubbles that they could cause a ship to tip over and sink.
Yeah. So I think the idea here is, things, little ocean creatures, sediment fall to the bottom of the ocean. You get this layer of like organic rich sediment and things get, buried on top of each other over thousands, millions of years, and things are decaying and you get methane gas forming because that's what the bacteria produce. I think this is like what they're alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So if something happens to like disturb the seafloor, and you'll find out like we're talking about an active tectonic zone, and we'll talk about the same thing when we talk about the other side of the world and the Devil's Sea in Japan. But this is a trench, so it's a subduction zone. You're going to have earthquakes and volcanic activity. So like you could have gases coming up from volcanic activity as well. But like there are plenty of ways to sort of like disturb or form cracks in the seafloor to like, release big bubbles of this gas up to the surface. And things expand as they move upwards.
Definitely a thing, but like maybe not the reason that ships are sinking.
Yeah. Now you're going to talk about why. Yeah, it's a thing, but like also might not sink ships.
Right. So Helen Chursky, who's a physicist and oceanographer, and her research has focused on the physics of the ocean surface and has been referred to as I put bubbly physicist, but as a bubble physicist, says, that's probably not what's happening here.
Yeah, okay.
She says that models have shown that the larger gas bubbles would break into much smaller and like very tiny bubbles until they come up to the surface.
Uh-huh.
And if the ship were sitting directly on top of those bubbles, the bubbles would push up basically, or like push up enough water against the boat to cause the boat to move, but would likely just totally push it to the side.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't just like randomly cause it to like flip.
Yeah. Like it's not like they're gonna like explode the ship or like
Right.
break it apart or
Right.
anything.
And then she does say that theoretically, if the boat were positioned exactly right and tilted ever so slightly, and the bubbles were to hit it at the right point, that like it could tip a ship over.
Yeah.
However, ships are specifically designed from preventing that type of tip or tilt to happen. So like,
yeah,
it like that's not what's causing ships to sink.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like an out there explanation, but like, probably not. But it is cool. Like,
It is cool.
It is just sort of a cool phenomenon in general, but probably not sinking ships in the Bermuda Triangle or elsewhere.
Right. And even if it were, it wouldn't be that spooky.
It's just gas. It's just some bacteria farts. Yes. So I guess moving on from the weirdest explanation, much more mundane are weather or storm events or just like regular old ocean events. But yeah, obviously this is a place in the world where you get really big tropical storms, and a large number, if not most tropical storms that, can eventually become hurricanes, have tracks that pass through this area. Yes. So there's a lot of storms that pass through this area. That is just like a thing that happens many, many times every single year. And yeah, you get things like big storms that can form hurricanes. Paige had written down in here like powerful downdrafts, but yeah, just like a lot of downforce from these storms. You get water spouts that form. So like there are just plenty of natural storm related things that are going to cause trouble for ships and like probably explain the vast majority of disappearances and shipwrecks and crashes in the Bermuda Triangle. One thing that could be a possibility is that you're getting rogue waves. So a lot of the stories like to tell you like it was, it wasn't a stormy day. It was generally calm. So then you start to turn to things like, oh, well, maybe there was a rogue wave, which we talked about it before in Spooky Oceans. We definitely talked about it again in the Alan Moore lighthouse disappearances. But if you want the official definition again, a rogue wave is defined as one that is at least 2.2 times taller than the average height of the tallest third of surrounding waves, measured from trough to crest. So, whatever. It's just a wave that is taller than the average wave, and they can get like freakishly big, like tens, if not like, 100 foot tall waves that are just like freak waves that are way taller than the ones around them. And like we mentioned before, there have been stories about rogue waves occurring for a long time, but for a long time, scientists were like, no, this is not a thing. Like, this is just sailors exaggerating. But then in 1995, a buoy actually measured one. So, yay. Fact becomes fiction becomes fact, not the other way around. But yeah, this is sort of the most mundane thing. Even like the rogue wave thing, we know it's a thing that happens. I don't really know about this part of the world, but I guess like there are pretty strong currents that travel through that area, ocean currents that travel through that area, and like you're on the edge of like a big open area of ocean. So it is possible that you could get, waves building up and traveling long distances that would be considered rogue waves. That would be my official opinion on it, which doesn't count for anything because I'm nothing
It
official.
counts.
What's next, Paige?
Next, and we basically already talked about this, but I'm just going to talk about it again anyway. So, not a lot. I mean, that's not fair. Of the what is it, 20 crashes or 20 plane disappearances? I don't know. I want to say like somewhere between like 8 and 10 of them were pre-1950s.
Yeah.
So I thought this at least worth talking about really fast. So yeah, I watched a show on the History Channel about the Bermuda Triangle. And like one thing that one of the guys on the show kept coming back to was like all of these reports about aircraft instrumentation failures while flying over the Bermuda Triangle and compass variation issues while flying over the Bermuda Triangle. And he claims that it's happened to him, though, while he's in the plane flying over the Bermuda Triangle. In the show, it never happens to him. So who knows? But I did want to like just talk about this for a minute because it's talked about like there being instrumentation failures or compass issues. It's talked about like it's proof that something strange is going on. And this is just one explanation for like what could be going on. And maybe even not today, but what could have been going on then. Mm-hmm. And that explanation is precipitation static, which is static that is caused by aircrafts coming into contact with uncharged particles, either through dust or snow, sleet, rain, and it causes a substantial negative charge on the skin of the aircraft. And so that can cause anything from inaccurate magnetic compass readings, loss of communication systems, avionics failures, like pretty much anything that would help you navigate or communicate with somebody as a pilot could be affected by that type of precipitation static. Mm-hmm. And modern day planes, basically anything built after the late 1940s, are built with static dischargers called static wicks. And assuming that there are like the correct number of quality static wicks, a pilot shouldn't have to deal with those issues now. However, like I said, losing any of those things in the 40s could have easily been an explanation as to why a plane would crash or get lost and run out of fuel, or, you know, any other thing that could have happened to a pilot at those days. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to mention that. And like, to be fair, if you were today flying either a really old plane or flying a plane that like didn't have the appropriate static dischargers installed, then like you could also see some of those issues.
Yeah. I also saw related to this that it seems like some places are like essentially just fundamentally misunderstanding how compasses work, and that's like causing people to think that something spooky is happening, or like saying that there are compass variations. Like basically no matter where you travel, like if you travel a significant distance across the world, like your compass is going to vary because true north and magnetic north are at two different locations. And depending on where you are, and your compass is going to point to magnetic north, not to like true north, top of the globe. So you have to basically correct for that depending on where you are in the world, and like where you are in the world is going to change that correction. So I would guess like if you're traveling across some body of water as large as the Bermuda Triangle, like that adjustment might need to change slightly as you travel that great distance. So it's like, that's not a spooky thing. That's just how compasses work.
Right.
So you're adjusting for the difference between true north and magnetic north. So yeah. Anyway.
I had read about that too. And I had read that like at some point within the Bermuda Triangle is where magnetic north and true north are the same.
Yeah, because I think you'd be like along a line. If you stood south and you looked towards true north, like magnetic north would be like a point along that line, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why they say that.
Got
it. Yeah. But again, not spooky, just
Not
how
spooky,
compasses work.
just something that happens. Importantly, from all of this, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association website says the U.S. Navy and U.S. Coast Guard contend that there are no supernatural explanations for disasters at sea, and they add that no official maps exist that delineate the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle. The U.S. Board of Geographic Names does not recognize the Bermuda Triangle as an official name and does not maintain an official file on the area.
Yeah. And as a reminder, like people who believe in the Bermuda Triangle also can't agree exactly where the Bermuda Triangle is.
Right.
So
they also don't have an official map or a boundary for the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. So I guess wrapping up our debunking of the Bermuda Triangle, we couldn't do this without talking about Larry Cush. He is a librarian who was born and raised in Wisconsin. So I loved that because I was like, oh, so close. But he ends up being a librarian at Arizona State University who was getting a bunch of questions about the Bermuda Triangle and was having to look things up about it and was basically just finally, I think he was like, you know what? I'm going to do some in-depth stuff about this and I'm going to write a fucking book about it. So he'd been getting a bunch of questions. He puts together this like bibliography with his fellow librarian, Debbie Blowen, and he ends up writing a book called The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, which was published in 1975. And like Larry was a real Renaissance man because I'm very tickled that he also wrote a book of popcorn-based recipes.
I mean, I need it.
I know. I was like, I'm going to buy that. But his major conclusions include one, that disappearances don't occur in the Bermuda Triangle any more frequently than anywhere else in the Atlantic Ocean. So, like, basically, you could draw a triangle shape anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean and statistically get the same results as the Bermuda Triangle.
What if the Bermuda Triangle is the entire Atlantic Ocean?
Well, then I guess that explains that. Like we mentioned before, he talks about the large number of tropical storms, and he specifically goes into the fact that a lot of stories say that these disappearances happen when the weather is calm, but that he was able to debunk a lot of those by like just looking at the actual meteorological records on the day that this disappearance or shipwreck was supposed to have happened. And it's like, no, actually it was stormy, so you're full of shit. He also talks about exaggerated numbers of disappearances and ones that were just like fully made up that people talk about. Like, good work, guys. Another fun point that I came across was that there was a 2013 study commissioned by the World Wildlife Fund. And I guess it's because like shipwrecks and stuff are a big source of, I don't know, I guess like pollutants or other bad things like for the ocean. So they want to like pay attention to making it safer, which I don't know. I guess I wouldn't have thought of those as like, I don't know. I don't know why that seems weird to me, but it did. But anyway, so they commissioned this study that identified the 10 most dangerous bodies of water for shipping. The Bermuda Triangle did not make the list.
Of course not.
Yeah. And this is despite that area being one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. So it's like, again, like it's nothing happening here is that unusual for just like general, the ocean is a dangerous and big place.
Right.
And that brings me to my last point about the Bermuda Triangle, which is that I think the only real spooky thing about the Bermuda Triangle is that the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, which is called the Milwaukee Depth, is located within it, part of the Puerto Rico Trench extends to a depth of 27,493 feet there, which is gross. Like, that makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I
That's
hate
like
that.
that's like 500 feet shy of Mount Everest, but like water.
I don't like when anything's more than like 10 feet. Basically, if I can't touch, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, we got like a lot of secret Wisconsin connections here though, because we had Larry from Racine, and then it's called the Milwaukee Depth.
Yeah,
But that's so much, that's so deep. That's so deep. Like
it's so
we
deep.
talked about in the Spooky Oceans episode that like the average depth of the ocean is like 12,000 feet or something, which is still stupid. That's like 2.5 miles. 27,500 feet. That's bananas.
I actually have goosebumps right now.
I told you, it's the spooky thing about it. Like,
It is the spooky thing.
what is even going on down there? I don't like it. But it also, I think, again, adds another layer of here's why things go missing and they're never
Right.
found, because you're never going to find anything down there. It's so deep. It's so deep. Like, the trench is like a big, long feature. It like gets deeper and deeper towards the bottom of it. So it's like, you're not going to find anything that sinks there. So it's not that mysterious. That stuff just goes missing forever.
Yeah, I mean, like, they just pulled a canoe out of, like, a 3,000-year-old canoe out of Lake Mendota, like, last year or the year before, that they had just never seen before.
Yeah,
like,
I did see that story. It was super
so
cool.
anything can get lost in water.
Yes. So, we said this was the Spooky Triangles plural episode, not just the Spooky Triangle episode. So, we obviously have to talk about some other spooky triangles. Anyway, there's a Wikipedia page, shut up page, that has under the category of paranormal triangles that lists them all. And apparently there are 12 main ones, which I guess are also known as vile vortices, which is like a whole other thing from a whole other pseudoscience author named Ivan Sanderson. But these are 12 locations on Earth, includes the Bermuda Triangle, and we're going to talk about a couple of the other ones. But yeah, it's like there are more than I thought, though. Like, I thought there was, like the Bermuda Triangle, but then it was like, nope, there's a lot of triangles.
Yeah, I thought it was only the Bermuda Triangle. Funny enough, the one I'm going to talk about, which is on the list, but I don't remember seeing it last time I looked. I somehow found it during my search for the James Dean Porsche episode. I have no idea how I ended up here.
Well, there you go.
That episode was a wild ride for me.
It was, but I liked it.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the Lake Michigan Triangle because this one's so close to home that I just sort of felt like I had to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I had to. So the area for this one is between Ludington, Michigan, Benton Harbor, Michigan, and Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Yeah, which I have twice taken the ferry that like passes through the Lake Michigan Triangle, and I have yet to mysteriously disappear. So so disappointing.
Well, now I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna disappear.
Yeah, if I'm gonna disappear, it better be mysterious.
So there have been, like all the other triangles or any other story we talk about, stories of bizarre weather events like chunks of ice falling from the sky, significant.
But isn't that just hail?
Right, like, yeah, that happened today. Significant turbulence taking down planes, underwater stone structures, and paranormal experiences like bursts of light, which obviously people are saying must be aliens.
The underwater stone structures I can speak to because there are like Ice Age stone structures that were built by prehistoric peoples, like before the lakes were the lakes.
Say, yeah.
Like
I mean,
when they
that's
were
like,
just like empty
that's
lake
not just
beds.
here.
Right. Like, and they, like, the lakes filled in after the glaciers retreated, and now they're flooded. So anyway, debunked that part of it for you.
Done. So there have been some like ship and crew disappearances. The first event occurred during the 17th century, or the first documented event occurred during the 17th century when the ship the Griffin, filled with furs and 30-some passengers, mysteriously vanished on its way from Green Bay to Niagara.
To Niagara.
That's what it said.
So they must have been going, they would have had to be going north then, right? Like then through the Sioux Locks and all the way down?
I think so.
Okay. Oof, that's a journey.
That is a journey.
Okay.
And then Rosabelle, a ship full of lumber, was traveling from Milwaukee on October 30th, 1921, and the ship never made it to Benton Harbor as intended. Instead, it was found bottom up 42 miles east of Milwaukee. The 9 or 11, depending on which source you're reading, of the crew members were never found. So that's a little spooky.
Ooh,
It was
spooky.
found flipped over.
There you go.
There you go. So that's kind of
It's a
spooky.
shipwreck. So
Yeah. But my favorite of all of the stories I found was from 1978 when a 23-year-old Hope College student, Stephen Kubacki,
I think,
though
yeah.
I also, apparently there's a famous person with this last name, and it's Kubaski. So,
like the Polish pronunciation.
yeah.
It might be Kubaski.
So it could be Kubaski. Was solo cross-country skiing on Lake Michigan and didn't return home. When the search to find him began, they found a one-way trail that abruptly stopped near the edge of the ice. This led investigators to believe he must have fallen into the water and drowned, which, yeah, that's probably what I would assume. And they assumed that eventually they would find his body when it came back to the surface, but it never did. More than a year later, in May 1979, Stephen showed back up at his dad's front door and was supposedly shocked to discover he had been gone for over 15 months. He says that he woke up 40 miles from his dad's home in a field, naked, and had no recollection of what had happened since the day he left in 1978.
Oh, man.
Isn't that crazy stuff?
That is crazy stuff. Did you do any like background, like trying to verify any of this?
Admittedly, I didn't really. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I sort of just assumed. I'm pretty certain. Hold on. There may have been like an actual interview with him like recently. If maybe I did look into this. I took these notes a while ago, so I don't really remember what I did.
Well,
but now that I think about it, I'm thinking there have been like recent or like more recent interviews with him where he like still swears
so he
by
maintains that story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yes. Here's what I have to say about this idea of a Lake Michigan triangle. I think that unless you have spent time in, or like we did, grew up in the Great Lakes region, people just like don't understand. Like they're more like inland seas, like not lakes.
Yeah.
They are huge. There are thousands of shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. I looked it up. Lake Michigan alone has 1,500. So like
a year?
No. Like just total like shipwrecks that they've documented.
In a year. I was like, Jesus.
No. But like
I'm never getting on that ferry.
Well, I don't know. There's like 50 in the Bermuda Triangle, and people are freaking out. Lake Michigan has
Fair
like
enough.
1,500. But yeah, there's 1,500. So it's like there's just a ton. Like they've been super active with shipping for a long time, but you also get like really big storms that roll up on people very quickly, like kick up very quickly and roll up on people very quickly. So like it's just super common to have shipwrecks and because of weather events. So it's like none of this seems mysterious.
And to your point, there are 1,500 in Lake Michigan, and we're talking about 50 in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
Like,
yes. Yeah. Like I don't I don't know. It doesn't seem that strange to me. And like,
No,
I
me
think
either.
maybe if you hadn't grown up around the Great Lakes and you hadn't heard, like, I've been hearing stories about Great Lakes shipwrecks and getting exposed to that like since grade school. Like that's like a rite of passage for for kids in the area, you know? So it's like we all know that like there are a ton of them. It's very common. There's a ton of tragic stories and like there are some that are very spooky and it's fun to talk about them, but like I don't think there's anything like paranormal happening here with some sort of weird vile vortice, whatever bullshit. Anyway.
Yeah. So really fast while you were
Yeah.
looking at that, I was looking to make sure I'm not a crazy person and that I actually did. Like I'm pretty sure I looked up this video and it does seem like people today even now are saying that like he maintains that this happened to him and that a lot of people just think that it was like probably something that like caused him to like leave society for a period of time and then has basically just like refused to speak with media about the incident because he doesn't want to talk about what happened to him.
Weird.
So there are like definitely some theories, but it seems like very much like he still hasn't spoken about that incident outside of saying like, yeah, I disappeared and then just showed up at home a year and a half later. So,
well, keep your secrets.
Yeah. Heck yeah. If you can keep it this long, you might as well keep to it,
You're in it now. Okay. Well, I'm going to take us back across to the other side of the world and to a place that I mentioned earlier, but to the Devil's Sea off the coast of Japan. This is also known as the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific, the Dragon's Triangle. I think there was like a couple other names, so there's a lot of names for this. Like the Bermuda Triangle, there is some disagreement as to the boundaries because, of course, there is. But generally thought to be off the east coast of Japan and stretches to the southeast. Although this one is a surprise because one of the maps shows it as a quadrangle. So apparently triangles are not the end all be all that I thought that they were, but So here's the thing about this. This is a place where the Japanese apparently refer to it as Mano Umi, which means devil sea, troublesome sea, dangerous sea. And I think people like see the devil thing and like latch onto that and think spooky, paranormal, something's going on. And it's like, no, it's just there are many places in the world that they refer to as Mano Umi. It's just a way that they denote particularly dangerous areas that sailors need to be aware of and watch out for. So, yeah. So, like, that might just sort of like write off the whole thing to begin with. But, yes. But this is, I don't know, popularized, I guess. Maybe it's the first description. I'm not 100% sure. By Charles Berlitz in his Bermuda Triangle book in 1974. It is the setting for the 2013 Tomb Raider game, which I thought you would appreciate.
Ooh.
So like wherever that like area that I've seen the beginning of that game. I know there's like you go through some weird fog and there's some bunch of shipwrecks and weird shit happening. Yeah. So that's the Dragon's Triangle.
Heck yeah.
So I like wasn't going to do this one as in depth. And then I was like, well, now I feel like I have to because I don't know. Paige has a connection.
I'm connected.
You're connected. Okay. So according to some, stories about this place go back a very long time. Some sources mention Kublai Khan, who was invading from Mongolia and lost 40,000 soldiers there in the 13th century. So like centuries and centuries of stories. Another notable disappearance is a fighter plane in August 1945, and apparently the last message sent over the radio by the pilot was something is happening in the sky. The sky is opening up.
Ooh.
Yeah, spooky. Another popular story.
Ooh, spooky.
Spooky. And like, some of these are just just like they're hard to verify. It's hard to know if they actually happened or if the details actually happened. They change depending on where you look at them. So,
Well, and then
who
if they
knows?
did happen, like what the hell does that even mean?
Right.
You
We
know?
don't know. Another popular story is of the Kaio Maru, which was a research ship that was supposedly sent into the Devil's Sea in 1951 or 1952 to find out what happened to a number of fishing and military vessels that went missing in the 1940s and 1950s. The Kaio Maru, though, wrecked and all crew were lost in 1952. And after this, it said that the Japanese government warned mariners to stay away from the Dragon's Triangle, which, like, that sounds like the perfect setup for some sort of, like, spooky nautical movie. It does, right? Like, you're
It
going to
definitely
find
does.
the Kaio Maru. Like, I would play that video game. Um, Our good friend Larry Cush, though, looked into this and found out that A, there were no military vessels lost, just fishing vessels, which, like, doesn't make it any less tragic, but, like,
Right.
it sort of ramps down the, I don't know, the grandness of it a little bit, I guess. The Kaio Maru was actually sent out to investigate an eruption at Moijin Sho, which I love this, which is an underwater volcano. And it wasn't sunk or like didn't like disappear forever. Like they found it. It was sunk by volcanic activity. Like there was an underwater explosion or like something happened that damaged the boat and sank it. The area that the Japanese government warned sailors about was just like nearby the volcano. Like, hey, this is erupting. There's shit happening here. Don't go there.
Sure.
Not the entire Devil's Sea area. And in fact, the triangle isn't even mentioned at all in any media until like about 20 years after the wreck of the Kaio Maru. So like it wasn't a thing. It was just invented by people in the 1970s when the Bermuda Triangle stuff started blowing up, as far as I can tell.
Great.
So
Good.
we're not surprised. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about is the fact that of these like 12 spooky triangles in the world, so many triangles, there are also ones that happen on land. One of those is the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. And this is an area of about 200 square miles, so much, much smaller than the ocean ones, and like a little bit more controlled. Like people actually agree on where it is. But this is a paranormal vortex with corners at Abington, I don't know, Rehoboth. I have no idea how to say that. Sorry, Massachusettsians. What do you call it if you're from Massachusetts?
Massachusettsians. Massachusettsians. I liked it.
Massachusettsians. We don't know. And Freetown. But this is like just some cryptozoologist named Lauren Coleman came up with this in the 70s and 80s. And like similar to Skinwalker Ranch style, like basically every paranormal or like weird thing that you can think of, ghosts, UFOs, poltergeists, Bigfoot, giant snakes, thunderbirds, puckwudgies, it's all apparently there in the Bridgewater Triangle. And I wanted to mention this more so to like point out that there are apparently these like spooky triangles that happen on land as well. I didn't go much further on this than the Wikipedia page because like my bullshit-o-meter was immediately going off as the Wikipedia page listed that there were like Native American curses at play and like cults that mutilate animals and perform ritual sacrifices. And I was like, this is dumb. This is like cultural appropriation at best and like satanic panic. So it's just a bunch of baloney, I say.
Sounds right. I mean, isn't it all? Isn't that what we've talked about this entire time? Also, it was important to me, so I looked it up. They are Massachusetts.
They're just Massachusetts?
Yeah, I guess. That's what this thing says.
But like Massachusetts is the state.
Yeah. The average resident of Massachusetts will refer to themselves as a Bay starter. However, officially they are Massachusetts.
But that's just the name of the state. Like if I'm from Michigan, I'm not just a Michigan.
You are now.
I'm a Michigander.
Yeah,
From Wisconsin, I'm not just we're the Wisconsins. No, I'm a Wisconsinite. I like Massachusettsite.
Massachusettsite.
There really is no way to do it. Like I get why they did it. How are you gonna Massachusetts
Setters. Massachusetts.
Yeah, Massachusetts. Why would you be that? Listen, I was born in Massachusetts, so I feel like I get a little bit of a say in this. I think we should be Massachusettsers. That's way better than just being a Massachusetts. Right?
It's silly. Hi, I'm a Wisconsin. So silly.
I think that's all I have to say. I kind of already addressed this last thing throughout. I just want to know, like, why can't it be the Bermuda Square, you know?
Did you answer that?
I didn't answer. I don't know.
I haven't thought about
why
this.
always a triangle?
I just feel like it's the only shape that you can always make work.
Oh, that's true. But it's not that spooky because you can always make it work. Like it's so arbitrary.
Right.
Make a triangle out of like anything. Points. But it's like if it was like, I don't know, the Bermuda Star.
Right.
That's like weirder.
Or even like even a square. I mean, if it were truly a square, like that would be pretty spooky. You know?
Or like they're called like vile vortices. So like vortice implies like spinning and circular.
Right. Nope. Just a fucking triangle. Which like literally I guess, like, you could make anywhere.
Vortice from the side. Is it because it's from the side? It would look like a triangle. You know what I mean? Like a vortex.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
It's stupid, but like but it would make sense. Thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So that wraps up our spooky triangle episode. Join Megan and Allison Kirkpatrick next week for an episode on spooky space. If you liked this episode, hit subscribe and share with a friend. Check the show notes for links to all of our social media accounts, our Discord server, and Patreon. If you have any questions about previous topics or ideas for future episodes, email us at spookysciencesisters@gmail.com. As always, thank you for listening and stay spooky. Spooky Science Sisters is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. For more information or to check out other shows, please visit evergreenpodcasts.com.